And so these gloomy glasses are kind of like looking outside and, it's just noticing like in the sky, only being able to notice all of the clouds rather than like the sun and the color of the sky and the birds, right? It's a mental filter where we're only able to acknowledge the negative. And sometimes it's easy to get into this headspace, right? Just acknowledging what's gone wrong or needs to be fixed. And so with gratitude, the hope is we can challenge a little bit of our gloomy glasses and allow ourselves to open up to a more truthful view of what's happening, which includes the good and the bad. And of course, on the opposite side, we have got our rose-colored glasses. And so I think sometimes a practice of gratitude can be misconceived as toxic positivity, right? So our rose-colored glasses would be looking outside and not acknowledging the thunderclouds or, maybe the really gloomy sky and just trying to pick out like a shred of sunlight, right? And that's not where we want to be with a practice of gratitude either. So our rose-colored glasses can sometimes be a little bit more in denial or out of touch with reality. But what I want to invite today is a balanced view, a balanced perspective where we're able to acknowledge the good through gratitude, but not dismiss something that's wrong or out of place. And so hopefully with our practice of gratitude, we won't be stuck with any glasses on, but we'll be able to help ourselves sort and discern a little bit more of a truthful place where both of these things exist together. So our first, or just kind of jumping into more like what is gratitude? I like this definition that gratitude is an affirmation of goodness, in the sense that when we practice gratitude, it's asking what has gone right or what could possibly go right in the past, in the present, and in the future. So it's acknowledging the goodness, right? Acknowledging what is positive and what has been beneficial for us or could potentially be. And so let's do an example of different lenses so we can get a little bit better of an idea of what that would look like. So if we got negative feedback, right? If we got negative feedback through our gloomy lens, it would just be like, oh, I'm failing. Of course I did it wrong, right? Kind of like that, just affirming the negative. Whereas if we look at negative feedback through more of a gratitude lens, it's acknowledging there's room to grow, right? I'm grateful for this opportunity, grateful for this knowledge or this insight. And then if we were to look at negative feedback in like the rose-colored glasses, it might come across as a denial, right? Like, oh, that's not really me, or that situation was out of place, right? And not allowing ourselves to benefit and acknowledge the goodness in that situation, right? And then on the opposite end, if we were to get like a compliment in our gloomy specs might be really easy to invalidate, right? Like, oh, that they were just saying that, right? That's not how it really is. Whereas if we are taking a compliment in our gratitude lens, it might be like, okay, look at this great thing that I was acknowledged for. Let me affirm the goodness in myself. Let me acknowledge the true value of myself in this situation. And then, of course, if we saw a compliment in the rose-colored glasses, it might be like, yes, this is what I've been saying, and there's no need to change, right? Like, just keep doing what's been doing, right? And in some situations, of course, all of those things may ring true. But what I want to invite is to find and affirm the goodness in a lot of different situations, and acknowledge that this level of gratitude and goodness can exist with the desire to progress, the acknowledgement that things are not always great, and not being dismissive of the negative. So this still kind of gives us an abstract view of gratitude. So let's get a little bit more into what gratitude is. And I'd like to open this up to you guys. What do you think of, or what comes to mind when you think of gratitude? So the first thing that I want to bring up with gratitude is that gratitude is an emotion, right? Gratitude is something that we feel. And a lot of the times it's something that we want to feel. It is also a very powerful emotion. Powerful in the sense that usually it's one of our forefront emotions. So if we're feeling a lot of mixed emotions and we can acknowledge gratitude, it's one that kind of shifts our attention towards it. And oftentimes it is because it's one we want to feel. Gratitude, however, can sometimes be uncomfortable, right? Gratitude can sometimes be challenging too. But a lot of the times when we're affirming the good, it opens us up to ask, like, what if? The positive what ifs, right? Sometimes our tendency is to go to those gloomy shades and ask all the negative what ifs. But this one, it's like asking the positive what ifs with gratitude. And awesome, I see a couple of chats. So gratitude, like being thankful for what you have, definitely being thankful for what we have and not always want. Definitely, right? Finding gratitude within that mixed emotion. And the next part of gratitude that I want to talk about is that gratitude is also an action. And I think that speaks to why this is such a powerful emotion, is that it's not only something that we just feel, but it's something that we can express. It's something that we can share with other people. It's something that we can create. We can seek after it. And so what makes gratitude so powerful is that we can tangibly do things to invite it into our lives. And so that's why I love talking about it so much today, because it gives us a lot to work with. And then the last thing that I want to talk about with gratitude overall is its effect on us. So gratitude has a strong effect on our perception. So like we've been talking about with the specs and stuff, is gratitude really affects how we see the world around us, how we see our challenges, our shortcomings, how we see our successes, and how we see our relationships, also how we see ourselves. And what I want to focus on is, because gratitude is an action, we can utilize it as a tool to shift our perspective to something that's more towards the truth, and something that is more enjoyable and a more mindful place for us. So let's talk about how we can do that. So we're going to talk about 3 different ways to cultivate gratitude today. We'll first go over self-talk, and then we'll dive into some more specific practices towards cultivating gratitude, and then we'll dive into the potential benefits. So first let's talk about self-talk. So self-talk is the inner monologue, inner dialogue that you have with yourself. And so your self-talk is kind of like that feedback that you've got going all the time, those opinions, those thoughts, that kind of help you, form your opinions and form your beliefs around everything that's going on in your life. So before we jump into too much of the self-talk, I want you guys to give yourself just a moment of reflection. And I want you to ask, how do you talk to yourself? Are we patient, supportive, understanding, and optimistic? Or maybe we're harsh or critical, worrisome, or even limiting to ourselves? Or maybe both, right? Depending on the situation, depending on your mood and where you're at, we can talk to ourselves a wide variety of ways. But now I want to open up another question to the chat. How does your self-talk impact you? What is the outcome of how you talk to yourself? So our self-talk strongly impacts how we see the world around us and how we see ourselves. So let's go through a brief example of how kind of self-talk works. So if you look on the screen, there is a cycle, and this is called the CBT cycle, so cognitive behavioral therapy cycle, and it's just kind of going over the relationships of our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors. We'll start with thoughts, but as you can see, it's cyclical, so it kind of can start anywhere. It also goes the other direction, so not just the one direction that these arrows are going. And so starting with our thoughts, if my thoughts are really negative, so maybe my thoughts are like, I'm going to fail. Last time I did this, I didn't succeed, so there's not a chance of me succeeding this time, right? I'm only going to embarrass myself. Then my feelings are probably going to be pretty hopeless in the situation. I'm probably not going to be very confident in myself or my abilities. And I'm probably going to be really hesitant. And then that's going to lead my behaviors. And so my behaviors probably, I'm going to isolate myself, right? I'm going to close myself off to an opportunity, and I'm not going to seek after it. Whereas if my self-talk goes to a place more of like, last time I failed, but I learned something new. So I'm probably not going to make that same mistake again. This time there is an opportunity for me to succeed. And there's always another chance to learn, right? Learning something new. My feelings are probably going to be a lot more hopeful, a lot more open to the opportunity or taking the risks. And hopefully I'll have a little bit more confidence in myself or the whole situation. And so if I'm feeling more confident, more hopeful, my behaviors are probably going to be more likely to do something, right? I'm more likely to try and open myself up to different experiences. And so this self-talk cycle helps us just kind of see how our thoughts can potentially impact how we feel and how we act. And so what we are going to do is we're going to dive into this thoughts area and invite some ways to practice gratitude so that we can be more in a place that's open and closer to the truth, right? Because some of those negative thoughts that we get stuck up in, especially if we have our gloomy glasses on, aren't always the truth, right? Sometimes when we hear negative, it's easy to think that that is the end all be all. But in reality, we live in a world where this good and bad mix together, and it's important to affirm the good just as much as it is to affirm things that need improvement. And so our self-talk ultimately includes all of our fear. It includes our biases and our core beliefs. And so it impacts the way we see minor conveniences. It impacts the way we see large projects or big decisions. It impacts the way we have relationships with our coworkers, with our spouses, with our families and friends. And it ultimately impacts like our relationship with us. So I would love to dive a little bit more into some ways we can practice gratitude so that we can shift our self-talk to a place that's more inviting for us. So some practices include journaling, number one. So I'm sure everyone has heard of keeping a gratitude journal. And so journaling is on here because journaling gives you an opportunity to reflect. It gives you time to really think back on what has happened or think through things that may happen or are happening. And I think that is one of the big points of all of these different practices is that we are drawing awareness to the good. Whereas sometimes the negative is made very apparent and is always super easy for us to catch and see. We want to be able to change our minds and our self-talk a little bit so that we're able to pick out the good and those little pearls and treasures as well. So creating a gratitude journal can be awesome. Or even if you have a journaling practice, just starting to acknowledge things that went right. Starting to acknowledge the successes and the wins, no matter how big or small they may be. And then our next one is writing. Oh, before I get too far into these, just another reminder. Pick out what would be helpful for you. And if you've done something like this before and it has not been helpful, maybe try something new. Also, gratitude is not a cure-all. And so if you've tried them and you're like, man, that's not for me, that's okay. So jumping back in to writing thank yous. So writing thank yous is probably a pretty explainable way of how we can use gratitude to express not only how we feel, but to share it with other people. And that's one of the other strengths of gratitude is that it can be a super contagious emotion. And so with writing thank yous too, I would also say don't limit yourself just to writing thank yous to people that can receive it, right? There's still a benefit in writing a thank you even if you don't ever send it out, or if it is a thank you to something or someone or someplace that can't receive it. So even like expressing your gratitude for like a song that you really love, and that song isn't going to be able to receive that gratitude the same way your grandma would be, but allowing yourself to acknowledge and affirm the good in those small things can be really beneficial. And our next one is acts of kindness. And so acts of kindness really puts the action part of gratitude into work. One of a really powerful way that we can show that we're thankful for someone or a situation or ourselves is by fulfilling these acts of kindness. And so this could be something super simple, right? It doesn't have to be like extravagant going to go volunteer somewhere. It can even just be an alteration in our mindset when we're doing something that we typically do to invite like an attitude of gratitude with it. So an example that I like to give with this one is I have houseplants and I really love my houseplants. So when I water my houseplants, I am going in and reminding myself, okay, I am providing this service and this kindness to them as I care for them, right? I'm doing these things because I love my houseplants. I'm taking care of my houseplants because I enjoy what they bring to my life and the value that they provide to me. And so the same thing can be done with like simple household chores, right? Or taking care of our children, or providing a meal, or creating a meal for ourselves or the people around us, right? Reminding ourselves that we're doing these things because we're grateful for the people or the things around us. And so that is another awesome way to just sneak some affirmations of the good in our day-to-day. And our next one is gratitude walks. And so gratitude walks, I like this concept because sometimes connecting the mind and the body is a great way to just focus in on feeling the emotion. And so with gratitude walks, it's not really a place where you have to worry about what happened in the past, but you're just going on a walk and you're naming things that you're grateful for that you can think of in that moment. And so even if that's like, I'm on a walk and I notice that the leaves are changing, that's something that I'm grateful for. And so gratitude doesn't always have to be a huge ordeal where I sit down and I hash out and re-reflect on everything that's happened, but it can just be like, okay, let's be outside in the moment, or even take like a walk to the water cooler and allow myself to like, okay, I love so-and-so's candle that they have in their office because I like walking by it and being able to smell that, right? Just being in the moment and picking out a couple things that we're thankful for. Our next one is meditation. And so meditation is a really great way to practice gratitude because it's almost like journaling for just our mind, where we're looking and we're seeking out our good. We're kind of just turning our mental attention to what has been positive and allowing our mind to acknowledge the negative, but say that's not necessarily what I'm focusing on right now. I love the meditation practice of envisioning a stream in your mind, and there's leaves passing by, and each thought is a leaf. And if you were to do a gratitude meditation practice, you choose which leaves you want to pick up. And so if maybe one of the leaves is a giant project that's looming overhead, I can pick it up and choose to practice gratitude with that if I so choose, or I can allow it to drift on and wait to pick up something else to practice gratitude with. And then our next one is spiritual practices. And so spiritual practices is just connecting to a higher power and expressing your gratitude. And so that higher power could be a deity, it could be nature, it could be yourself. But the verbiage of like counting your blessings can be applied here, where it's just I'm looking and I'm expressing thank you for things that have gone right in my life, or I hope to go right in my life. And then our next one is accepting and giving compliments. So giving compliments is a great way for us to acknowledge gratitude for other people and share it. And then accepting compliments is a great way for us to accept the value in ourselves and affirm the good in ourselves. So I'm a big proponent of accepting compliments. I think many of us diminish or invalidate our compliments because sometimes it's a little uncomfortable to receive them. But I like the practice of validating the compliment. So acknowledging that that is a truth that someone shared with you, and I want to accept that as something good about me, right? Even if I don't 100% believe it, I can acknowledge that they do, right? They see that as a truth and a goodness about me that they affirmed. And so I want to accept the gift and accept the positive feedback as a compliment. Our next one is affirmations. And so affirmations, just bringing us back to self-talk, are ways to talk to ourselves. Affirmations are positive, short things that we can say to ourselves that help feed in that positive self-talk. And so it could also include like mantras or quotes that are uplifting to you. Uplifting media. So we talked about how gratitude is powerful because we can seek after it. Sometimes we're not in a place to like create it and think about all the things we're grateful for in our lives. So it can be awesome to look elsewhere, right? Is there a song that fills your heart with like a positive emotion or makes me feel grateful for a certain situation, or a poem or a podcast, right? That just kind of puts me in a good space. And that's where we put that uplifting meaning. Our next one is self-care. And so self-care is taking time to show yourself gratitude. So this one, self-care is basically like the acts of kindness for yourself, in the sense that we, are taking time to care for ourselves because we value ourselves, because we are worth it, right? We're showing and affirming that there is good in us by taking time to go exercise if that's something that's really enjoyable to you, or taking time to create a healthy meal if that's something that you need, or go mountain biking, or read your favorite book, or create a piece of art, right? Whatever it may be, it's inviting this mindset that I'm doing this to take care of myself and show myself I'm thankful. With this one, I like to invite the idea that if you were really thankful for something from someone, how would you express that, right? Maybe we would write a thank you. Maybe we would just give a compliment and express our thank yous, but also maybe there's something we would do for them in return. So finding that gratitude for ourselves and in ourselves through self-care is a great way to show I'm affirming that there's good and value in me and I'm building it up. Okay, and then mindfulness. And so mindfulness, a gratitude mindfulness practice that we could do is just checking in with our five senses. So if we find ourselves stuck in that gloomy glasses state, maybe it's time to go through my five senses and acknowledge something that I notice that I'm thankful for. So maybe there is, I have a fresh piece of mint gum and I'm really grateful for how crisp it tastes. Or I have lotion on my desk and I love how fresh or sweet it smells, right? So mindfulness is really just bringing us back to the moment and asking myself, what do I notice right now and what can I express gratitude for in the here and now? So If you guys have any questions or thoughts about those, please send them in the chat. But I think the overall purpose of these practices is that I think too many of us diminish the positives in our lives, in our day-to-day, and we magnify the negative. And so when we take the time to really reflect and search for what we can find gratitude in, it helps us give equal weight to that positive and that negative. So we are going to practice. If you guys have pen and paper, I would love for you to write these down. I think that just gives us a little more just makes it a little bit more tangible in what we're doing. But if you don't have pen and paper, that is totally fine to just think about it. So we are going to express some thanks. And while you're doing this, I really want you to focus on acknowledging the value that it's brought to your life and affirming the good. And you can get as detailed or as simple as you'd like. I would love to hear some of the things that you guys are writing, but I'll give you guys about 2 minutes for this first one, 2 or 3 minutes for this first one. So for this first one, I want you to express your thanks to a food that brought you comfort as a child. Okay. If you wrote one, I'd love to hear what are some of the foods that you thanked in the chat. And for our next one, I want you guys to express your thanks to a place that gives you shelter. And so by this one, I don't necessarily mean it doesn't have to be a building. It doesn't have to be like a physical place. It could also be a community or like a physical community or like an online community, any place that has been really welcoming and comforting to you.
Elise, this is Holly. Are you able to see the comments in the chat or would you like me to read them?
I do not see any comments, so I'd love to hear them.
Okay. Well, I'm going to back up and start reading them to you because there's some great ones.
Oh my goodness, yeah, I'm missing some of them here. Let me make my chat box bigger. I can see a couple of them.
Ice cream. It makes me think of eating ice cream when I was young. Late at night, my father would get it out and we would eat it as we talked. Someone else wrote, I thanked breakfast for dinner. Another one, home sweet home. My mother made our house a home. We always felt comfort there. Another one, as a kid, I loved it when we ate breakfast foods at dinner time because it was so much fun, unexpected, and brought us together.
Yeah, we've got a lot of
And
breakfast for dinners.
yeah, only now do I realize that my mom was doing it because she was so busy and breakfast is fast, easy to make.
Awesome.
And there was a question earlier. I just wanted to go back. One of the practices was um, acts of kindness. So when I perform an act of kindness for a family member, often it becomes an expectation on their part. Any suggestions?
Yeah, so we'll jump on that and then we'll come back to the practice. You guys are welcome to send in some chats for places that gave you shelter because I love to hear that too. But when performing an act of kindness becomes an expectation, that's difficult. So I think it's fair to have open communication around that if possible, right? Making it clear that, hey, this is something that I am happy to help do right now and this time, but it's not something I'm able to do all of the time. And then, of course, if that boundary is disrespected and people are like, oh, but you haven't done this, it's fair to also set up the boundary that, hey, I'm not available to do that all the time. I'm happy to show my gratitude when I can and provide this when I can, but it's not fair for people to if you've set that boundary, it's fair for you to reinforce it, right? And say like, okay, this isn't something that I can do all of the time. Granted, that is uncomfortable and not always the most fun thing to do. So if that just always seems to happen, maybe that's not the best way to express gratitude with those relationships.
Thank you. Also, for shelter, fires and fireplaces.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay. I love those guys. I also really like the practice of thanking things like food and shelter, right? Um, that don't necessarily receive gratitude the same way you and I do, but still gives us an outlet to acknowledge and affirm goodness, be it in any part of our lives. So,
Okay, just wanted to jump back. Mac and cheese made me feel independent and could take care of myself. And another one, my gym gives me shelter because it always welcomes me and I feel accomplished afterwards.
very nice. Very nice. I like that. Okay. So, if you guys are still writing the first two, I want you to take a pause in them because this last one is the most important one, and I would like everyone to try and write something for this one. So, for the last one, I would like you to express your thanks to yourself. And so, it can be to yourself as a whole, but if we're not in that place, that's okay too. It can be to a part of us. So it could be to my eyes to help me see, my hands to help me work, or it could also be to like an action that you've taken. But I would like you to somehow express your gratitude to yourself. Okay. What emotions are we feeling after writing these thank yous? Okay, definitely, right? Hopefully we feel a little bit of gratitude. Anything else? Any other emotions? And no emotion is the wrong emotion.
There's a comment, uncomfortable to do this because I don't typically appreciate myself.
Yes, it's so true, right? When it comes to those glasses, right? Even if like the gloomy glasses, maybe we're not always super nice to ourselves or even just like dismissive of ourselves, it gets comfortable. It gets comfortable to be in that space. And so challenging it and moving ourselves to more like a mid-range perspective is out of our comfort zone. So that is super fair to feel uncomfortable when expressing gratitude to ourselves or other people. Definitely.
There's another comment, surprised that I have been able to get through a lot that I don't give myself credit for.
Oh my gosh, yes, right? We do not give ourselves enough credit. And gratitude hopefully helps us shift, right? And be like, there is a lot of awesome value in myself, right? And I think sometimes our misconception for this too is like we want to fight that the pride or getting full of ourselves. But remember, gratitude isn't diminishing anything else, right? Gratitude is just giving the correct worth and acknowledging the good things in ourselves. So that's awesome. I think that's a great practice to start. So again, there's no right or wrong emotions to feel with gratitude. And if you did this and you're like, oh, I feel awful, that's okay too. This can put us really out of our comfort zone. And we also talked about things that are close to you, and so they can bring mixed emotions, and that's okay. That's where we want to be, right? To acknowledge the good and the bad live together, right? The positive and the negative, the difficult and the easy, they live together. And gratitude is shifting us away from diminishing all of that good so heavily and giving it the appropriate value so that we can acknowledge the good within ourselves and the world around us. So if you guys have any last comments or thoughts or emotional outbursts concerning this, please send it in a chat or I will hang back after to check in with you. So let's talk about some of the potential benefits to gratitude. So I like utilizing gratitude because it does create a balance of views, right? It's a very tangible way for us to acknowledge good in a world where it's so easy for us to diminish it and just, hold on to that negative. And so this allows us kind of this balance where I'm able to hopefully acknowledge both. Now uh, gratitude takes practice. So even if, you feel maybe some immediate benefits from just our brief exercise, a lot of these benefits take time. So jumping back to self-talk, our self-talk has been built up and accumulated over years and years and years of existence. And it has been impacted by the way other people talk to us, the feedback we get in a ton of different situations. And so we're not going to be able to just change it overnight. we have practiced the way we talk to ourselves right now. And so with gratitude, we can introduce a way to talk to ourselves differently, but it takes time. You have to practice positive self-talk. You have to practice challenging your perspective in order to get some of these benefits. And again, gratitude's not a cure-all. And so gratitude can be a helpful tool, but it's not, unfortunately, saying your thank yous every day isn't going to fix everything. But there are some things that it can help us improve, and we'll talk a little bit of why. So our first one, well, we'll just go through all of them really quick. So first one is positive mood. It can invite a positive mood because we're looking for the good, right? We're inviting and opening ourselves up to feeling emotions that come along with gratitude, right? Contentment, happiness, surprise, excitement. Also, increased resilience. So increased resilience because we are looking for what can go right. You know, going back to that self-talk example that we gave, if we look at a failure as an opportunity, we're a lot more likely to get up and try again. And so if gratitude helps us change our perspective, it can help us acknowledge the positive what ifs, right? What are the things that could go right? Reduce stress and burnout because we're acknowledging the balance. When we're wearing our gloomy specs all the time, it wears on us. It wears on us a lot. And so being able to kind of challenge that perspective puts a little more balance into how we see stressors around us and how we see challenging situations around us. And with this one in particular, so burnout is higher levels than ever, right? We thought 2021 was not going to be so much like 2020, but it has been, and there's been a lot of stress. And so if gratitude alone is not helping, and we're still feeling really overwhelmed and really burnt out, I would just make it a mental health plug, you know, reach out to your employers and your EAPs or your insurance and try to help find something more that can help with this balance and the kind of burnout world we're living in right now. Okay, and our next one is increasing ability to enjoy the moment. So this goes back to that mindfulness practice. When we are searching for things we're grateful for in the here and now, it can be a little bit easier to acknowledge, what am I enjoying right now? What am I here for and present for in this moment? Fostering hope for the future. It's because we're looking for what is good, right? Kind of goes hand in hand with that resilience. We are asking the positive what ifs because we asked what did happen good, and noticing what happened good in the past helps us acknowledge what could happen and have hope for what could happen in the future. And then improved relationships. So as we acknowledge strengths and accomplishments in ourselves and others, it helps us bond and see the value in each other. Especially ourselves. So I think that's a great practice to continue if that was helpful today. So after everything, I hope that this was able to invite a little bit of questioning into your life. You know, asking yourself how you talk to yourself, what are the perspectives that I'm looking out of? And what could I possibly do to put me in a place that's closer to the truth, right? Put me in a place where I'm acknowledging the good just as heavily as I'm acknowledging what may need improvement, right? Giving equal weight to these things so that we're not stuck in either of those glasses, but in a little bit more of a clearer view. So I will open it up to questions or any last thoughts, but thank you guys so much for participating. I appreciate the everything that you guys wrote down and your practices and everything you shared.
Okay, we'll leave it open for a few minutes for questions. Go ahead and put them in the chat. There's a comment that it's like talking to plants. Positive self-talk helps us blossom.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There are several thanks. That was a wonderful presentation, Elise.
I
Learned a lot.
appreciate your gratitude.
Here's a comment. Thank you, Elise. You made my day better.
Oh, very sweet. Thank you.
Another comment. It's so nice to hear something uplifting.
Good. Good. Find more media like this.
Last call for questions. One more minute. I don't think I'm seeing anything else.
Okay.
So if there's no more questions, I just want to thank you again. It was a wonderful presentation. I learned a lot and look forward to doing it again sometime.
Thank you guys. Could I get the recording when it comes out?
Sure.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.